Hi, this is Liz, and welcome to my podcast, Spiritually Speaking with Liz. Just a little reminder, if you could like and follow on my YouTube channel and click the little notification bell, and also if you can follow on the app that you listen to your podcast on. So today we're looking at a little bit of a different angle, as you'll see, because I'm joined by three gorgeous ladies. And today we're going to have a little spotlight on menopause. So we are all of a similar age and perimenopausal and menopausal. And I just think it's so important for women to talk about this. It is getting better out there. I think more and more people are talking about it, but there are still some places where it's not spoken about or women feel uncomfortable. So my mission with this podcast and with this video is just to reach out to those women and say, you're not alone. I've got the three gorgeous women here who are going to give you a little bit about their story. And we're just going to generally have a little chit chat. So I will introduce you to them first. So I'll start at my top left with Dianne. So Dianne joined me a couple of weeks ago, and she is our adventurous little yogi who's moved to France.
Hi, everyone.
And then we've got Gilly. Gilly joined me last year for my first sofa session. So she actually came and sat on here with me. And we did our first chat then about menopause. And Gilly was quite instrumental for me. She helps me through a lot of mine because I felt very alone. And then we're joined by B. So B is, we call her our little, well, I call her our little high flyer, because she's really banging the drum for this and doing an incredible job. So B is an associate professor, clinical education, and associate director, student support at the School of Medicine in the University of Leeds. So she'll tell you about it herself, but B started her journey quite young at 42. But at 2018, she decided that I can't be the only one going through this. And she aired her vulnerability. I think she was incredibly brave and went to speak to people within the university to help other people, other women along the way. And it's not just women it affects, as well, as we'll talk about. So welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you.
So B, we're going to start with you. So if you can just tell us a little bit about your personal menopause story.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. Thanks for inviting me. It's lovely to have the opportunity to talk to other people about it. So yes, I was 42 when a consultant said to me, "This, Mrs. Macpherson, I'm afraid it's the start of the end for you." And I think my kind of eyebrows hit my hairline. But to be honest, I thought, well, I'm a qualified health professional. I thought I understood a bit about menopause. I thought because I was young, because I was fit and healthy, I was really lucky that I'd had a family and I didn't want any more children. So I thought, great, no problem, no more periods, excellent. I thought, don't need to worry about contraception, excellent. And I just thought that, I would just move through this transition quite easily. But the reality for me was really quite different, and it was more like a punch in the face. And I think I was probably all right for the first couple of years. I think, like many women, we just get on with it. You're used to dealing with your periods and your hormones and pregnancy and childbirth. So I think we're very resilient as a species, may I say. And but as time went on, I began to experience like a massive range of physical, physiological, and at times psychological impacts of perimenopause, which I didn't know about, I didn't understand, and really left me feeling quite isolated and alone, because I certainly felt at that time that there was no general conversation about it. Nobody talked about it. When I tried to talk to friends about it, nobody seemed to be having a similar experience. But I genuinely have been humbled to speak to hundreds of women over the last just over 5 years now. And mine is a shared experience. It's not all the same experience, but it's not just my lived experience. And actually, it is reflected in the Chief Officer's report, Medical Officer's report of 2015, which is called The Health of the 51%. You know, and women, we're half the population. This is, you know, I've no wish to pathologise the menopause. It is a natural transition, but it is not necessarily an easy transition for some people. And as you rightly say, it's not just a women's issue. We you know, you know, there may be other people, such as people who are non-binary or trans men, who may experience. But of course, can I just say one more thing? But one of my missions, well, two of my missions was because I think it's still taboo to talk about menopause, and I think you're absolutely right that there is a much more general conversation about it, which I think is excellent. But I still think the really difficult stuff's not necessarily talked about, and I get why that's difficult. And this is where my menopause brain's just kicked in, because things that I can only remember what one of them was. Oh, it doesn't matter. It'll come back to me, I'm sure, in the course of our conversation. But yeah, sorry, you said about making myself vulnerable. Can I just add to that? Because you gave me a bit of a moment when you said that, because it wasn't an easy thing to do. And I think particularly where, I don't think it's easy for anybody, but I think particularly where I work, I felt I would be very judged, you know, if I was honest about some of the signs and symptoms I was having. But I suppose my desire to make things better for other people was only just slightly greater than my fear of how vulnerable I might be making myself.
Well, I think that's amazing, because it takes great strength to do that. And working in academia many years ago, it can be quite archaic in the pathology of it, can't it? It's quite set and stayed, and there's this rigid view of just go away and get on with it. And you know, like you say, we don't talk about it. Di, what would you like to say about your journey?
It's interesting listening to other women. This is the first time I've sort of spoke about it. I've got two sisters and we're very close, but even that, you know, it's not something you sit around and have a cup of tea talking about, really. You just get, like you say, you just get on with it, don't you? And then over time, you start sort of dropping something into conversation, and they say, oh, yeah, I had that, or I had this. And that opens up the channel for conversation. But I think mine's been a really gradual experience, and it's been confusing for me personally, because as we spoke about last time, Liz, that there's been lots of injuries over time, sporting injuries, that have affected my spine. And I really believe that also affects hormones. You know, it's sort of all linked, the whole body mind thing, isn't it? And
of course.
So over time, all the things that menopause, the symptoms, like the aching joints and the mood swings and the irritability and the frustrations and all the things that go on your checklist, that can be mixed up with severe pain. And so over time, I've sort of thought, oh, it's just me hurting because my joints are hurting, my spine's hurting, my head's hurting, everything's hurting because of injuries. But then it kicks into the psychological side of it and the emotional side of it. And your partners start saying, God, I can't deal with you, you're psycho. And you think, I'm actually a really nice person. I'm not psycho at all. What is going on with my head or my life or my being? And so over time, you start sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. You start putting things together and think, it can't just be because of injuries. It can't just be because my partner's irritating the heck out of me. Or and all of these things come together, and then you question the balance of it all. You know, practicing yoga is all about balance, whether it's physical, psychological, spiritual. It's all having a beer on one hand and having green tea on the other. It's balance, you know, and so when that balance starts to become really obviously out of balance, you do start thinking, hang on a minute, you know, there's something more to this. And I think what happened, I saw a gradual imbalance in the hormones, in the moods, in the psychological side of things. And the pain level just kicked up with the joints, and bleeding, and all those things start to get progressively worse. But then the emotional side just really went off the Richter scale. So you start crying your heart out for like, what the hell happened there? So a ladybird got crushed or something, and you think, and you're just psycho of crying, or something little, and it's just out of balance. So from my point of view, I've always gone down the natural therapies. It's not that I'm against medicine. I think it's got a place and it's fabulous, but I've always just chosen all natural therapies as much as possible. So in yoga, the Ayurvedic side of dealing with hormones, the yogic practice, the acupuncture, all these, massage, anything that balances the holistic system. Mm-hmm. But what I found was, when I can only speak for me, but when my psychological side, like the hormonal side, just became so out of balance, it's unstable, and you need something a bit more to kick that into balance. And so that's what turned me to HRT.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add to that, because I completely agree with what Di said, and I developed really extreme anxiety. So I've done the same drive to work for 20 years, and I became, and I love driving, and it never bothered me, but I would find myself in the outside lane thinking, oh, I'm driving in the outside lane, what am I doing? But I could always kind of manage to say to myself, oh, come on, Macpherson, get a grip. I became mute at meetings. I thought, well, I can't speak because people think I'm
palpitations or like nervous, self-conscious.
But I did try lots of different stuff before HRT, and I'll come back to some other Chinese medicine that I still access. But I now honestly believe that HRT is a life-saving and life-changing treatment for some people.
I just finish on really what I'm saying there, that because exactly. I think what really turned my head towards HRT is recognizing that the chemical imbalance needed to be stabilized. And I am so, like I said about the balance, it is not against medicine. It's not for pro therapies, anything like that. It's just finding the balance in life, and whatever works for whatever person in whatever way, that is balance. And when you're having these anxiety attacks for no reason, you might be teaching yoga, which I'm perfectly comfortable with, and done thousands of classes, and then suddenly you're getting a palpitation and you're nervous and anxiety, and you're waking up with anxiety, and you think, what's that all about? So when you're sitting in the doctor's office asking for HRT or to get the ball rolling, and you're in floods of tears and out of control, it's just not normal. It's not natural to be like that. So there are something for everybody. And if HRT is it for you, then that's great. Some people find, I'm going to stop talking, I'm sorry, but one of my biggest interests is around the world. I've mixed with lots of natural native tribal people, from Inuits to Zulu to Aborigines to American Indians to Asians. And it is very interesting to me how it's the Western woman that has seemingly the most problems with menopause. Now, whether that's diet or stress levels or whatever, but that's opened up for a whole different kind of conversation. But those women around the world, I never saw anything like Western women's symptoms. That's I'll just throw that out there.
Let's swing back to that. Let's go to Gilly now, and just Gilly, if you give us a little insight on your story.
I mean, so much of what Dianne and Bea have said already resonates. So probably end of 2019, and I think things get very muddled when you're looking back on it, and actually it's quite easy to to downplay how it felt at the time.
Yeah.
I'd been in Nepal on a holiday, and I don't remember having any symptoms at all. So that was the end of 2019, sort of November. And I, making like big decisions: where are we going, where are we going to stay, what we're doing, and not feeling anxious at all. And then the end of 2019, I just remember starting feeling incredibly anxious, exactly as sort of B and Dianne have just said. And for me, it wasn't a gradual thing. It feels as if it just kind of like, it was a bit of a sucker punch. It just came. And I'd gone from being a reasonably calm, balanced, making great decisions, knowing myself, pretty reasonably confident, to just, I couldn't even make a decision. Like, just even the tiniest little decision was just like, no, it's just beyond me. And that would be, then I get upset with myself that I couldn't make the decision. Then I start crying. Then I become overwhelmed. Then I become more anxious. The palpitations would come. Same as you said, Dianne. I'd be sat crocheting on the sofa, which is something that I taught myself to do during lockdown. And for kind of to settle, I'd be doing it, and my heart would be pounding. I'd be like, this is crazy. I'm sat on my sofa chilling out, and I'm up here, and nothing that I did would bring me down to what I felt was me. I just felt like I was just, so it was the palpitations, the anxiety, that sort of kicked it all off. And then it was the rage. Just, I mean, I have a temper, I'm a redhead, I'll accept that. But it was just that absolute uncontrollable rage where it would just come from nowhere. Often at work, because I think I probably, out of work, I was really good at not putting myself into situations. So sure, the queue at somewhere, and I could feel myself getting like, for goodness sake, can't the queue go quicker? And, almost that completely not, too much rage for the situation you're in. But it was like a switch just went. So that was sort of my main thing. And then it just kind of carried on. And it took me a long while to go, is this the perimenopause? And it was just like, I'm just anxious. I've got palpitations. And the first time I went to the GP, I was asked if my periods were still regular. And I said, yes, they are. Well, you're not perimenopausal then. Gave me propranolol for my anxiety, dismissed. I was told that it was a pandemic and everybody was anxious. And at the time, I wasn't in the place to even question that. I was like, oh, okay. So that was me on propranolol 3 times a day for a number of months until I felt able to go back and go, this doesn't feel right. And I'd done loads of reading, took with it the second time, was like, these are my symptoms. This is what I want. I want HRT. And I knew that I wasn't going to be happy unless that conversation was ended with me having a prescription, basically, because I felt desperate. But that took a lot of courage to get to that point.
I think that's really, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I think that's really interesting. I think that's really interesting. And I think your experience is reflected among many, many women that I've spoken to. But going back to the rage, it's not obviously it's not funny, but it's funny that I was the opposite. I thought I never got cross at work.
Really?
But it was at home, and I wonder if it's because I felt more relaxed at home in a way.
I live on my own base, so there's nobody to give my rage to.
But that's what took me back to the doctors the second time, because it was one day, and I described it as absolutely incandescent. I was incandescent, and I'm a children's nurse. I'm a redhead, but I'm not particularly person. And I'd already been to the doctors in the January and said all of this stuff, and the doctor was lovely and listened to me, but said, oh, you're probably a bit young. But this is after a consultant had told me 3 years previously, so I think I'd managed for till I was about 45. So I went off, and this was 6 months later. I struggled. I couldn't run anymore. I used to run up mountains. I couldn't run anymore. My hips hurt, just like Dianne's saying, my hips, my joints and muscles, the palpitations, the anxiety, the hot flushes where I was taking spare underwear to work to change my bra and pants because they would be wet through. There was days I had to leave work because, despite what one of my friends calls double bagging, using a tampon and a pad, it was just unmanageable. But it was feeling like that, and I sat in that doctor's surgery and wept and just said, I need help. And
Did you
so,
feel out of control? Because I just felt totally.
I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I was so angry that I'd
anger.
like that. I felt shame.
You don't feel like you, do you?
And I did similar to you, Gilly. I actually recited, because the GP wanted to prescribe me antidepressants, which is still sadly a historical practice that seems to go on. And
I was offered them as well.
Yeah, well, and they're very.
It was suggested to me as well.
And if they don't work, let's go to HRT.
Sorry, Di, say that again.
So I'm saying that's what was offered to me too. You know, sitting in the doctor's office, sobbing out of control. You're offered antidepressants, and if that does, let's try those first. If that doesn't work, we'll try HRT.
I was quite adamant that I wasn't depressed. That was one of my things on my list, to be like, I am not depressed. You know, I just made it quite clear to them, because that was suggested to me as well. You know, we talked about HRT, and she was, well, we could look at antidepressants. Like, no, I said, I'm not averse to using them if I genuinely felt that I was depressed. I am
they
not.
They don't have the training though,
there's something amiss, and it is not. It's a it's a hormonal imbalance. It's not depression, but some people don't feel, confident to say that, do they? It's like, oh, okay, well, the GP is saying this, I'm going to take them then.
Yeah, and
it's almost like a challenge with them. I mean, I had to go. I saw somebody privately, because it was just the go away, you're fine. I was like, this isn't, and I'd taken. Mine started 2020 on the way back from India. Well, that was what I thought was where it started. And I was literally like cardigan on, off. And Kev's saying to me, for God's sake, will you keep still? I was just like, I can't. I was just like burning up or freezing. So when we got to India, I got one of my guys to take me straight to one of the Ayurvedic practitioners. And he prescribed me with something called Shatavari, which is like a balancer. And, it was brilliant. It was brilliant for up until last December, I would say. But like we've been saying, like Dianne, like you were saying about the tribes, I do think a lot of it is the stress levels we have, because I'd had a very stressful summer.
Yeah.
And I think it had caught up with me then with busy in the shop by the end of December.
Yeah.
And now I'm having a menopausal moment. You see, now my brain's
There's no judgment here about that.
So it was the tribes. So it makes you wonder. You see, I was in what will it have been 2000. I've been a holistic practitioner for years. So I decided in 2000 that I was going to take myself off anything hormone related to almost prepare myself. So I was 30, but that was in my head, just thinking, right, well, yeah, I'm going to come off it now. Kev was really good. He went for the snip. So, all good. And I was really thinking that I'm just going to sail through this. This is just going to be so easy for me. And I used to be, I said this to Gillian, and I feel so ashamed about this. But as a holistic practitioner, I used to, when women used to say, oh, shall I go on HRT? My response was no, don't, because of what had been in the press about the risk of breast cancer. And so, it was painted as the big bad wolf, wasn't it?
Can I say something about that? Sorry to interrupt.
No,
Pre-2000, many women were on HRT. It wasn't an issue. And it's because of that research that was done by the Women's Health Initiative that said that you're at a greater increased risk of breast cancer if you take HRT. Now, that research is proven not to be good quality research. And the women they interviewed were all 10 years post-menopause. And actually the current research very much shows that you are, as a woman, you are more likely to develop breast cancer if you are obese or overweight than if you take HRT. But I think that's a very cultural legacy that we still hold, and nobody gets educated. Why are we getting to perimenopausal age and not under this? Gilly and I are health professionals. How come we didn't know about the range of symptoms? Because nobody is educated. We're not educated. But doctors aren't educated, but I do think it's a women's health issue. You say women's health and everybody gets up scuttled. If people think you're going to mention periods or vaginas.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
oh.
Panic, change subject. Well, I went to a talk by a GP, and she was saying very much that, about the data wasn't fully given. They've just given like a snippet and not the whole story. So after that, I went to see her partner privately, who is an Indian, not that matters, but she understands Ayurveda and she understands. Now, I know Dianne had this because this is how we got talking about it, but I had such shame for going on HRT because I'm a complementary health practitioner. I've been practicing this since 1992. Yeah. And I'm going against my word, which is always a big issue for me anyway, but going against my word, what I'd said to those women, don't go on it. So I felt the guilt for that, but I felt the shame of going on HRT because why can't I do it naturally? And I've had the younger version of me, now me at my age, I've had a conversation with several women, late 30s. Oh no, you don't want to go on that. Take this, take that, take the other. And that was me. So I've had karma. I've had a taste of my own medicine. But I don't understand why we feel this shame. And it's acceptance. We have to accept. And once I got to the acceptance, it was like everything was sort of got that balance there, because I was taking the HRT then. But when I first started taking it, and I've tried everything, I've done the lion's mane, I've done the Shatavari, I've done the CBD, I've done, I can't even remember. I've done so many things. I've done the sage tablets, which I do still take now and again if I get hot flushes back. Nothing was, I gave them all fair chance. Nothing was working. And this doctor said to me, nothing will give you estrogen other than estrogen. You can have estrogen boosting supplements, but if there's no estrogen there to boost, what's going to happen? But Dianne, you said the same, didn't you, about that with the shame?
Yeah, I think what happened, the shame didn't cut. It's not so much shame, it's confusion really, and different words. But at the beginning, when my emotional state was so out of control that you can't function, you become a hermit more than I would normally, and you take yourself out of society as much as possible because you can't deal with whatever. So when I went on HRT, it was almost like a desperation really of something has to happen to get these emotions under control. And when they're under control, then this was what in my mind, when they're under control and I'm stable again, then I'll come off HRT and I can carry on my little way with all the ways that I like to deal with natural health things. So, naivety, and it's just desperation of get these emotions under control and then I'll have a rethink. So obviously now what's happened is you're on HRT until you're not, until you whatever age, until you 10 years down the road, they decide to, oh no, you don't need them anymore, or 5 or, whatever years down the road. So that realization for me, once my emotions were under control, once my life is normal and back to being human again, now it's chance to think, because you can think, you're not foggy, you're not desperate, you're not psycho. So now I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I don't like or want to be attached to this, having to get a drug every whatever time. I don't like having to call my doctor and say, can I have a refill of, and that dependence on anything, but especially a drug. But it's it's a tricky one, because I've tried playing with the HRT patches. I've tried playing with taking them a day later or 2 days later, or oops, I forgot to take it, just to see what would happen. And it's not long before that emotional cycle sneaks back in again. And so it's that dependence on, oh my gosh, I actually need these patches and they need to be taken regularly. And when I don't, it's not necessarily pretty.
You're braver than I am, Dianne, that's for sure.
I had a lady in the shop yesterday, and bless her, she had to go. She'd had a bleed, so they told her she had to come off her HRT. Had to completely stop it cold turkey. I can't even imagine that now.
The other thing that happens is when I first went to the doctors, I'm battling with this personal side of being attached. It's like contraceptive. You have to take it to not become pregnant or do something else, but you're dependent on that. And so you go to the doctors, you get your refill, you go to the pharmacist, and they say to you, you're on the last one, so you're pretty desperate knowing you need them. And they say, oh, the supply has stopped. We haven't got a supply. Oh. So then you're psycho in front of this pharmacist crying and out of control because you're on your last patch and you're scared to death of the consequences of your experience. So the supply and demand leads, there's suddenly a big demand for these patches or drugs, and now we can't get them. So then that dependency again is just an awful feeling of being.
Can you relate to this, Di? Because I know you're saying about your personal feeling, but I think people need to understand that it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get on with the patches at all. It was the progesterone in the patch. And I tried the patches for a while. I eventually worked out how to get them to stick, which, was a challenge. But the progesterone in the patch, because it was absorbed systemically, just didn't agree with me. And I had...
Me neither.
Well, I'd be interested to hear your experience as well, Gilly, because I didn't talk about this for quite a few years, because I think I've been on HRT the longest out of the four of us, I think. And I didn't talk about this for a long time because I was so ashamed. That it had a massive impact on my mental health. And what I realised, I'm so not nice for you, Gilly, but nice for me that you're nodding.
I feel a bit emotional with you saying.
Well, I couldn't talk about it for quite a few years. I would realise I was sat in meetings at work, not concentrating about what was going on because I was looking at the roofs of the buildings opposite, thinking, I don't know if I'd be brave enough to jump off that.
Yeah.
And then I'd think, well, I could buy paracetamol on the way home. And then I could give myself, you'll get this, Gilly. I'd give myself a talking to and say, well, I'll just stand up. They'll just tut at me when they're putting up my Parvalex infusion in intensive care because I've given myself liver failure. But I felt so ashamed that I had those thoughts and feelings. And I didn't talk about it in any detail. And I remember saying to one friend that I'd had these thoughts and they just said, oh, you're not going to do it, are you? So that was the end of that conversation. So I just didn't mention it again for a very long time.
I didn't say to anybody either.
No. So, but when I came off the patches, it was like almost instantaneous to the thought that I thought I must have been in my head. So the patches. So I just think women don't understand that it's a bit of a trial and error with HRT, and you have to try different stuff. And what might meet your requirements one year might not meet your requirements another time because things are fluctuating and changing the whole time.
Yeah. I did stay on the patches, but not the progesterone part of it. So I started off probably similar to you on the combined, and I was absolutely grand for 2 weeks. I was like, oh, this is it. This is a miracle. This is brilliant. I felt not quite back to me because it took a long time for it to tweak and increase, but the progesterone part, precisely what you just said, B. I mean, I feel quite emotional even saying that because I spent probably about 4 or 5 days crying upstairs in my bed, just curled up in a little ball. I didn't text anybody because I felt vulnerable. I felt ashamed. I felt scared. I considered the same as you, just ending it all because I couldn't cope with how I was feeling. I just felt just awful. And eventually, at the same time, I had there was a bereavement, and it just literally just tipped me over the edge. to the point where I made a call to somebody and I was like, can you come? And she was like, what, now? I went, yes. And it was one of a very, very close friend who just went, okay, I'll be there in 10 minutes. And she knew, and I just sobbed and sobbed. And she's like, why didn't you ring me 3 days ago? I was like, I don't know, because I couldn't do it.
Because you're a culper.
It's what, sorry?
You're a culper because we get on with it, because we think we shouldn't be feeling
One
like
of
this. Because
can I just say, one of the hardest things for, like, you talk about shame or embarrassment or humiliation is the bleeding. And, you know, obviously teaching yoga, very sort of sporty in some ways, and the bleeding when you're going through pre or menopausal, that's different for every woman, I think. But for me personally, it got quite heavy, and I'd always had very regular, very small. I think the more stronger you push your body, the lighter your periods are sometimes. I know that's not true for everyone, but throughout my life they were very light, very regular, and then suddenly, you know, they're getting bigger and bigger, and you just think, and then randomly, and so you're out, you may be wearing a dress or some, and then suddenly you think, oh my gosh, where's the nearest toilet? You know, sorry to talk bluntly, but it is a real, you talk about the shame and the humiliation or the embarrassing side of menopause. And I know it's just when I started to think about moving to France, I thought, oh, it'll be lovely and sunny. I wear white dresses and white trousers and white, you know, little shorts. And then I thought, no, a cat in heck's chance. Am I going to do that when suddenly I may be flooded with bleeding? So that was something that was a real consideration of positive for the HRT because that takes that under control.
Settled that then.
So that's definitely an experience I think a lot of women go through, of not quite, you know, your handbag is full of, you know, the humongous sanitary towels or whatever you use, and wherever you go, you've always got that emergency supply.
Isn't it incredible how everybody's story is just so different? Because I had none of that.
Right.
No, me either.
Like none of it. So I feel incredibly lucky that I haven't had that symptom.
And a lot of the other thing is that really depends on if you live alone, or if you're with a partner, or if you've got good friends, you know, and it just absolutely floods where you know, I can remember being in Italy as a child, and she'll hate me for saying this, but my mum, I think she didn't have many menopausal symptoms. She's 80, so it was a while ago. But I remember being in Italy on holiday, and she had a light pair of trousers on, and it happened to her the same. And my dad just put his coat around her, tied it around her waist, and we rushed off. I didn't quite understand what was happening at the time, but looking back, that's what must have happened.
Sorry, Di, I thought you'd finished.
That's right. Yeah, go on.
No, I mean, I do have that experience. You know, I've been teaching at work and had to leave the classroom because there's just blood running down my legs.
Yeah.
The same with the hot flushes, just having to change my underwear, and people saying, are you all right? And in the end, I would own it and say, I'm having a hot flush. No, you're not. Mom, I am. No, you're too young. Well, no, I'm not. And these are like medically qualified people who would be telling me that I was wrong. And I used to think, well, I've seen a specialist, so I'm sure I am. But I wonder if, and you mentioned this just briefly earlier, Liz, I'm really hopeful that through education we can change, get rid of this taboo, you know, with more understanding. And it's not just about women, or certainly women of a certain age. I think this is what I was going to say at the start. One of my other myths I want to bust is that it's old women that menopause happens to, because when I was, like I said, 42, and because I'm who I am, I went to look at information about menopause, and what was reflected back to me were women who looked to me like my mum. There weren't women in the 30s and 40s. So we really need to get rid of that misconception that this is old women. But in addition, there will be young women who have primary ovarian insufficiency. There will be younger women who have cancer treatments or need surgery, and so have an enforced menopause. We really do need to change culture. And I think and it's not just women, but if everybody understood what our hormones do for us, so if people understood that estrogen nourishes tissues, it regulates bone turnover, it's important for heart health. If people realise that progesterone helps with those feelings of calmness and you need progesterone for sleep, if people understood that testosterone isn't just for men, it's important for women as well, so we need testosterone for motivation, for optimism, for sex drive. If people understood what these, I mean, that's very simple and basic. I know I'm saying it in a simple way, but if people understood that on a simple level, they can then start to understand why they're having some of these signs and symptoms that they might be having. And I wonder if that would take away some of the shame we're all saying we've perhaps felt in different ways, whether it's about the symptoms or about the treatment that we choose or choose not to have.
I think because we women of our age and more are starting to talk out more and more and more and discuss this. I mean, over the last few years, it's probably been discussed more than you can ever in the past.
Yeah, it has.
But what a friend of mine is, I think, early 30s, and what I think is lovely is because we're starting to speak out, she has already planned, she started to have a few little symptoms and started looking into it and taking HRT lightly, rather than waiting for it to be so out of control and so miserable and psychotic and relationship problems and can't hold your job down and all these things that some people have experienced. Their education, because of us speaking out, is there, and it's starting to become more aware, and therefore she's taking precautions much earlier rather than leaving it 20 years.
And do you think that will change in the future? Do you think that when it filters down and we start like younger, because I had no idea, so 46, and I'm like, I should have been able to go, oh, I think this is the perimenopause, and I didn't. Do you think that will change in the future with us all talking about it more?
Well,
I think education will bring it in.
They're talking about introducing it into school curriculums, aren't they? But they need to introduce it into undergraduate and postgraduate medical curriculums.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know a GP who told me that menopause was not mentioned once in her GP training.
That's terrible, isn't it?
I think it's getting better though, isn't it? And I guess it's important to say that, I mean, my first experience was a fairly negative one, but my second experience was really, really positive. And because I'd asked for the menopause specialist GP within my surgery, who really listened to me. But I think it's important that you go almost prepared. You almost need to go armed with some information and kind of what you want, so that you aren't just sort of leaving not really any further forward. And I guess that when you're feeling anxious, you're feeling vulnerable, all those things, that's really, really difficult to do, to be able to go, this is what I want.
Well, you don't know. So like for me, who was very anti-HRT, I didn't know anything about it. So when I went to my regular GP, she said, oh, it sounds like you want HRT. What do you want? I was like, I don't know. What do I need? And I said, I want to do it. So I got the bioidentical, which was massive for me, because that's how I eased myself into it. Oh, it's bioidentical. It's okay. It's it's made from the cactus, blah 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 blah. But there isn't that education, and I think this is the key to what it comes in. And B, this is where you're doing a massive amount. And Gilly, you've set up a group in our local area, but it's a Facebook group as well, where women. We had first meeting, didn't we, the other week, where women can come and just sit and talk like we're talking, and not feel ashamed, not feel embarrassed to ask a question. And on the times it went quiet, and then somebody would say something, and then there was like an echo of, I had that, I felt that, or my friend felt that there's so much that overlaps, and there's so much that needs the education. And I think our generation are really pushing that through, because I get like, my mum's like, Dianne, yours is 80, my mum's 84, and she's it wasn't like that in my day. I just sailed through it. I didn't take anything. And I don't know whether, going back to the tribal thing, whether it is down to stress, whether it's due to taking medication, taking the pill, does that have anything? I don't think anybody really knows yet, do they?
I definitely think there's definitely a work element, because we work very differently to the way previous generations worked. And if I say again, there's, you know, what would be considered perimenopause or menopausal age, we are the biggest growing demographic in the workplace. And we're long-serving, knowledgeable, skilled women, so we should be nurtured through this transition, not feel like we can't cope. Gilly, that's so great, because I've been running, I call the Menopause for Thought Cafe since 2018 at work, and I did think about setting one up locally. I'd love to speak to you about that, because I've got a massive community now at work, and it's peer support, and I get such lovely emails from people afterwards. Sometimes people come, sometimes we're face to face, sometimes we're online, sometimes people come online the first time, they don't put the cameras on, and they'll come back next month and say, I just sat with my camera off and wept because I thought it was just me. A lovely email after we talked about vaginal dryness 1 month, a lovely email of a colleague saying, thank you, my husband and I are now very happy. And I thought, when there's a woman who'll be more productive at work. But just going back to your point, Julie, we're health professionals, and we didn't really understand about it. But we're able to advocate for ourselves, and we're used to advocating for other people, yet we still found it difficult to advocate in this instance. So I just think about, you know, women who don't have this, you know, have the same professional experience as we do, who aren't as able, who is supporting those women, and that's kind of yeah, so there is education going on, but there's a long way to go, and I think it's great that the general public or women are understanding a bit more about it. I agree. So when I run my workshops, I say to people, get a notebook, write everything down, go to the GP with your notebook and say what you want. You have to go, you really do have to go and say, this is what I'd like to try. But there's definitely education of the health professional workforce needs to happen.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on. I was just saying, a lot of what I learned about menopause was actually teaching yoga. So I learned by observation, really. So time and time again, classes would have women of all different ages come into classes. And when they walk through the door, I'll read body language to adjust what kind of yoga I might do. If they're all hurting aching of shoulders or anything, I won't do arm work, I'll do leg work. So I'll read people as they come through the door. So over time, when women would come in and I'd noticed that I'd either be down or emotional or moaning about something aching and over time, there's lots of repetition when you're running classes over and over again. You know, people will show the same habits or the same verbal communication. So I started to sort of see all these patterns in women of a certain age. and I started to learn that actually that's how I'm feeling. Because as a teacher, you don't talk about you. It's all about them. So I would hear and listen and support and adjust my classes according to what they were complaining about or emotional state. But then I started to think, well, that's exactly how I feel. That's what I was thinking. That's I'm going through that too. So even though in yoga, you never really talk about yourself as a teacher, I started to share. So when someone would come in and they would be emotionally down or something or suffering in some way, I would just take that opportunity to say, do you know, I feel really, really melancholic today or something. You know, I would take the opportunity. And that would lead to a sharing. And when women start to share, it's really powerful. And the energy is fantastic. So education isn't just about books and doctors and all the rest of it. It's about sharing and having the courage to say, do you know what? I feel rubbish today and I'm just out of control and I need help. And I'm going to a yoga class and I'm angry. So, you know, and it's just fabulous to be in a class where women have the courage to cry on a yoga mat or just kick the hell out of it and, you know, and leave with a community.
Your yoga classes sound great, Dianne.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it was always run. I always advocated. I didn't really know, it wasn't from a menopausal point of view, but I always advocate, if you're angry, that is perfect yoga. Feel it, own it, be angry. Don't deny it. Just, or if you just want to be in child's pose and sob your heart out, and we'll just carry on, and you can join us when you feel like it. Pure yoga right there. And that to me was the best types of yoga, when women had the courage to just be whatever.
That does take
to be
courage,
themselves. Yeah,
that really does.
Yeah.
I
So
embraced
that's
yoga, Dianne. Yoga did really help me. I'd not done yoga
me
before
too.
because I was a runner and I ran up mountains and I'm a total warrior and
yeah,
that kind of thing. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And yoga and stretching are my two favorite things I do now. I absolutely love yoga now. But the other thing that I have regular treatment, I have regular tweener. And is so if people, I know I'm sure everybody does, but tweener is one of the central tenets of traditional Chinese medicine. So it's medical massage, and that has massively helped me. It helped me with the muscle stuff, it helped me with the joint stuff, it helped me with the emotional stuff. And I'm not a headache sufferer, but I know that people who do have migraines, it can be worse during menopause.
Definitely.
And I know that this tweener practitioner I see has helped a lot of people with kind of migraine, and tinnitus is one of the less.
Yeah, exactly. Acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, I've had for 20 years. And it, I suffered from migraines, and it was every month. And they used to tell me it wasn't connected to your periods, but it was pretty obvious to me that every month the hormones were out of balance. And I would be in bed 2 days, and the only release would be crying, vomiting, and sleeping.
That's because like my 18-year-old daughter.
And
she's just got an endometriosis diagnosis, which is a whole other conversation.
The hormones they really are the problems of many things. And once they're out of control, something needs to be done in whatever way suits that person.
Liz, can I just do a little plug for Phoenix Tweener?
Yeah, go for it.
In Helperby, Phoenix Tweener in Helperby. I'd recommend.
There you go. Send me a details, and I'll put it in the show notes. I didn't realize we had somebody so near.
Yes, and actually, I did speak to Ed. He's called about it because when you were looking for people, I appreciate this is all still being recorded. It would be useful if you want to do another one at some point.
Yeah.
I have regular treatment, and it helps me massively, as well as the HRT. I think it's
I think
like Dianne said, it's about balance, isn't it?
I think we all agree that the HRT's a lifesaver. For all of us.
Yeah, and giving people the right information so they can make the right decision about their care. It's I always say I'm not about prescribing stuff, I'm about describing stuff, but I think
it's good.
It's letting people know what is credible sources of information, and that shared experience is so important.
I think so. I think wrapping up, I think that, like you say, that we need to talk more, hence why we're doing this, but women need to talk more and know that it's okay to talk. Or if you want to be anonymous, then you could go to people like people like Gilly on the Facebook group, contact them privately, just to say, because you guys are there, aren't you, for open reach, just to have that extra support. And it does take courage, but we've got that courage. We're amazing women, and like you say, we've come in our, I know some of you aren't 50 yet, but in our 50s, late 40s, 50s, we are, just down to you, Julie, we are, I think we're coming into our own, and it's about claiming the crown. That's what I was going to call my podcast, Claiming the Crown.
Yes.
Because it's about stepping into your power. And I'm talking the royal me here. We might not feel as attractive as we did when we were in our 30s. We might not look as attractive to ourselves as we did in the 30s, but we've got so much more to offer than that, with the wisdom that we've learned, with the knowledge that we've learned, and the ability to listen, the ability to share with other women, but just to sit and listen to them and let them tell their story, because that's not done a lot, is it? People don't listen. People are already formulating their response, and it's back and it's back and it's back. And so just to sit and hear somebody I think, like Gilly, you did for me, sat and listened to my moans and my, but why this, but why that, and I think that is just worth everything. Just that.
It's a free gift, isn't it? We can give each other. It really is.
And nobody tells the trees they're too old. You know, nobody tells mountains they're too old. Can you imagine if we were like trees and mountains? Can you imagine how we are amazing.
We are amazing. And it's for, in my worst of it, I felt, well, I wanted to be invisible, but I then felt invisible.
Yeah.
And it's a weird feeling, from somebody who can be quite loud and outspoken and say what I want to have that where I didn't want to, or I was scared to, and that invisibility. But now we've got this strength. So it's communication, courage, and education, I would say, are my takeaways from today, that we all need to pay more attention to and look at women around you. And if you're somebody who's watching this, listening to this, and you sat sobbing, crying, reach out to me, reach out to one of us, or reach out to a friend. Just talk to somebody. Don't take it in on your own. You can't do it on your own. We need that network of women. This is where we come together, for somebody to say, oh, I felt like that. Oh, I felt like that. Honestly, it just lifts off you completely, doesn't it?
Share. Yeah,
it really does. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. It's been amazing to see you all together, and I'm really grateful for your time. Is there anything that you'd like to finish off with before we go?
No, just a massive thank you.
Yeah,
this is great, Liz, that you're
conversation.
Yeah, well, let's keep it going and just keep that conversation going in the yoga class, in the menopause group, in the cafes that you're running. You're amazing, ladies. Well done. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful. And I will speak to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.